Okay, in this series of videos, we're going to take a look at this notion of economic exposure. This is different from transaction exposure, where just by virtue of a single transaction, a sale or a purchase in a foreign currency, you're exposed to changes in the exchange rate. And if they go in the wrong direction, you're hurt. In this case, with economic exposure, we're talking about the exchange rate effects on a business overall. So not just a single transaction, but kind of the whole business, all transactions of the business. And the degree to which a firm's cash flows are sensitive to unexpected or random changes in exchange rates is really what operating exposure is all about, or economic exposure here. So let's think about a firm that's doing business in Europe through a subsidiary. All of the costs and okay. Sorry, I was looking at my notes here. We're going to look at another example here in a second. All of the costs and revenues are in euro, so there isn't any single transaction to worry about. What we really care about is the net of the revenues and costs, right? So that's the profits. The revenues and costs are kind of self-hedging in terms of exchange rate changes, but this net that's left over, hopefully it's a positive number, that's a profit, eventually will be repatriated. So if we make 10 million euro and we're bringing that back from Europe to America, we're going to be exposed to exchange rates, and to the extent that those exchange rates go in the wrong way, we have less money than we thought, right? So in a sense, this thing is very much like a receivable. If we have net income that we're going to bring back over, that's just like making a sale and getting paid in that money and bringing it back over. So if the currency appreciates, we win, and if the currency depreciates, then we lose. Again, this is an example of economic exposure, but it's very much analogous to transaction exposure from the standpoint of you got this net income. It's just like a receivable that you're bringing back. But let's consider a different example here, and this is I call it the high operating exposure example. So we have a firm that is has an English subsidiary, so it's selling in England, but all of the costs are incurred and paid in US dollars. So we're buying supplies from American suppliers, they charge us in dollars, but we are selling in England, we're getting our revenues in pounds, and so we kind of have this exposure, potential exposure to exchange rate fluctuations that would hurt our business. So let's think about, and this is a good kind of exercise always to do, which scenario would be good for the company and which one would be bad for the company. Now in this case, if you're selling something, hopefully always and everywhere your revenues, you're selling it for more than your costs are, right? That's otherwise you don't have a very good business model. You want to have some nice big margin there where you're making money on every transaction. But if you have this situation and the dollar costs go up by virtue of an exchange rate fluctuation, your revenues might stay stable, your costs have gone up, and that would hurt the business. So that's what I want you to kind of think about. And in this scenario, what would hurt you is if the dollar appreciates against the pound, or that is to say, the pound depreciates against the dollar. So we're going to look at a numerical example here in a minute and think about a situation where the pound went from $1.50 to $1.40 per pound, right? So that's a decrease in the value of the pound. The pound is depreciating, but conversely, the dollar is appreciating. It takes less dollars to buy a pound. So in this case, what's going to happen is the pound costs are going to go up because we're buying these inputs from U.S. suppliers. In terms of pounds, we're going to be paying more pounds for those inputs, but our sales revenues aren't going to change. We're going to keep our price the same, and so what's necessarily going to happen is profits will go down. And so we're going to look at the example here and assume a scenario where there's no pass-through whatsoever, and that means we're not changing the price of our goods in England. So let's look at the example here. So example one, we got this strengthening dollar. Again, it's going from $1.50 to $1.40. That's the dollar appreciating, the pound depreciating. We're selling in England, and this is the base case right here. This is the baseline, what we're kind of comparing to. So we're selling 10,000 units every year, and the price is £65. That turns out to 650,000 pounds in revenues. Our costs, again, are incurred in America, and let's assume that those are $800,000 in costs. We got to pay our suppliers $800,000 for the pieces and parts and everything else that we're using. Now, in pound terms, that's 533,000 pounds. And that's just the, goodness, what happened? That's just the dollars divided by the pounds per dollar, right? So 533,000 pounds is our costs in pound terms. Our pound profit is going to be 116,667. And then in terms of dollars, if we kind of convert those back to dollars after we do all our business over in England, we've got $175,000 in profits. So that's the baseline. Now we're going to see what would happen if the exchange rate changed and our costs in pound terms go up. So again, we're selling 10,000 units at a price of 65 pounds per, 650,000 in revenues. Our costs now in pound terms are the $800,000 divided by $1.4 per pound. So our pound costs have gone up considerably. 571,000. Our pound profit has gone down, and it's gone down by 32%. This is just the kind of the ratio of these two numbers. So down by 32.7%. And if we repatriate that money, the 110, we'll end up with $110,000, and that is 37% less dollar profit than we had before. So we have two effects going on here. There's the competitive effect, where our cash flows are going down in pound terms by about 33%. And then there's the currency effect, right? Those pounds, when we repatriate them, are worth less. And so the total effect on our dollar profits is this combined 37% reduction. So we have two things going on, the competitive effect and the currency effect. Those two are conspiring to reduce our dollar profits by 37%. All right, let's go back to the slideshow here and think about a possible response. One is to raise the prices in England. We could have a full pass-through, so that is, our currency went down by 10%, the exchange rate went down by 10%, we're going to raise our prices by 10%. That would be an example of a full pass-through. So this is either let the price change based on the exchange rate or let the price change just enough to get back to where we expect it to be. And then we're going to look at another possible response. We're going to raise the price but not by the full amount. We're going to do these kind of in turn. So let me go back over to the spreadsheet and look at this example here. We are raising our prices. So again, 10,000 units, 65. This is the baseline scenario. In this case, we're raising our prices by the same percentage that the pound decreased. So we're getting back. So this price has gone up by kind of the proportion that 150 went down to 140. So this formula is just taking the 65 pounds, multiply it by 1.5, and then divide by 1.4. That's going to gross up the sales price to this higher level, 69.64. And if it's easier, maybe thinking of a goal seek type of a deal, our ultimate goal is to have these dollar profits be exactly the same. So whatever price is needed to get this number exactly the same, that's the price that we're talking about. So if I did, 67, you can see that that's not getting there. If I did 69, that's not quite there. 70 is too much. And so the exact right price is going to be that formula that I used. So 69.64, and it's probably some fractions of pennies there as well. But anyway, this price gets us back to the exact dollar profit that we had before. So let's follow through this example and see what happens. Our revenues have gone up substantially, right? We've raised prices across the board, so our revenues have gone up. We haven't experienced any change in sales, number of units sold, I should say. So our revenues have gone up in pounds. Our costs have gone up in pounds as well. So in pound terms, we're actually better off here. We've got 125,000 pounds, which is 7% more than we had before. But when we convert this back to dollars, because of the currency effect, we're going to be back at zero. We're going to be back where we started. So the idea here is that our currency effect is going to offset the competitive effect exactly, and we end up in the exact same place we had. So our cash flows are going up in pounds, enough to offset the currency effect. That's what's happening in this competitive effect. The currency effect, we're losing money just because pounds are worth less, and the net is zero. Now this would be a highly unlikely scenario because it suggests that there is no elasticity of demand. That is to say, we raise the price, but we have no drop in sales whatsoever, no drop in the units sold. And it is unlikely that that's going to happen, certainly in a competitive market. To raise your prices by 8% and have no lost sales because of that is not going to be very likely if you're in a competitive market. However, if you have a very strong competitive position, perhaps you can raise your prices because costs have gone up. Everybody still wants your stuff, and they're going to keep buying it regardless. I'm going to call that for now unlikely. Most of the time we think in economic terms of raising prices, lower units sold. So we're going to stick with that example. We're going to continue, by the way, with this example in the next video. We've already gone past 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop here and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.